Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into a horror classic, one that really gets under your skin. Jeepers Creepers from 2001.
Oh, a good one.
You sent over a bunch of articles, you had some personal notes, so I'm guessing you want to dig deeper than just a regular review, right?
You got it. There's something about Jeepers Creeper that makes it more than those other early 2000s horror flicks. It just sticks with you.
Okay, see, you're already freaking me out a little. But for everyone listening, let's set the stage here. We're talking about a Victor Salva film, right?
Right.
The guy who went from low-budget stuff to having Francis Ford Coppola back his work. Talk about a glow-up.
Totally. I think Coppola's name is actually what made a lot of people give Jeepers Creepers a shot. They wanted to see what the fuss was about.
And fuss there was. This film blew up. Everyone's talking about that monster,
Yeah.
the creeper. But what makes the creeper stand out? I mean, you've got your Jason Voorhees, your Freddy Kruegers. Why is this one different?
Well, to start with, the Creeper's not just some dude in a mask. It's not just a slasher villain, with a tragic backstory or something.
Right.
This thing, it's presented as like an entity, almost mythological.
Okay, now that is scary. See, and now you've got me. So tell me more about this entity. What makes it tick?
One of the things we figure out pretty quick is it seems to be on a cycle. 23 years it sleeps, 23 days it emerges to feed. But what makes it really creepy is that it's not feeding on just anyone. Or anything, for that matter.
Whoa, hold on. You're going to have to unpack that one for me. It's not just about bloodlust. What else is there?
This thing, it's selective. The film gets into some pretty unsettling detail about how the creeper chooses certain body parts to eat. Eyes, tongues, hearts.
Oh,
Like some kind of buffet of terror, right? And it uses those parts to regenerate.
So this isn't random then. It has a plan. This
No.
creature's got an agenda.
Exactly. And that's where the real horror comes in. See, in the research you sent, there was mention of this concept of olfactier. Basically, the creeper can smell fear. It's not just seeing you, it's sensing you.
Wait, so you can't just hide. You have to somehow, control your fear. Talk about nightmare fuel. How does that play into the film's whole atmosphere of dread?
It adds this whole other layer of psychological horror, right? It's preying on something primal, instinctual.
Yeah.
Which is way scarier than just some guy with a knife,
Yeah. No, totally. And you know what else gets me about this movie? That sense of dread starts building long before the creeper even shows up. There's that truck scene early on.
Yeah.
Source material mentioned it.
Oh, yeah.
That really sets the tone.
That truck, oh man, that's a masterful filmmaking right there. It's such a classic horror trope, too. Creepy vehicle, deserted road. But the way Salva uses the camera, quick glimpses of the driver, those weird angles, it's so effective.
And we're seeing all this before we even know what's really going on.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of which, the source material mentioned how important the relationship between Derry and Trish is.
They're siblings, right?
Yeah, Derry and Trish are brother and sister.
Yeah.
And that dynamic's really important because it gives you that sense of normalcy, like relatable sibling bickering.
Yeah, right.
And then when the terror hits,
It hits hard. The contrast just makes it even more jarring. And that bond between them, it raises the stakes, too.
absolutely.
It's not just about survival at that point. It's about protecting someone you love.
Man, it's making me think about that scene with the antique phone in the diner, where Derry's trying to call for help, but it's clear they're totally stranded.
Oh, yeah.
And that feeling of isolation.
Totally. That scene, it really gets to you. It's playing with that classic horror trope isolation, but it's amplified here.
Yeah.
The endless fields, those empty highways, it's like the setting itself is a character.
Working with the creeper almost.
Exactly. And you can't forget how Salva uses sound in those scenes. That eerie silence, the creaking of the old diner, the truck engine rumbling in the distance. He knows how to build tension, that's for sure.
Speaking of tension, we've got to talk about the ending of Jeepers Creepers.
Mm-hmm.
The source material I gave you, it really highlighted how divisive it is. What makes this ending so different from other horror films?
It's bleak, man. It's uncompromising. It really throws you for a loop because there's no last-minute escape, no triumphant music swelling or anything. Just subverts your expectations and leaves you with this lingering unease.
Right, it sticks with you. The source material I gave you, it mentioned this idea of the creeper as this kind of dark, mythological figure. It even called it a collector. What's the significance of that word collector in this context?
That's what's so interesting. The creeper's not just killing to survive, right? It's putting together its own messed up collection of human body parts, like trophies almost.
So it's like the creeper sees itself as an artist in this really twisted way.
You could say that. And that fear it senses, the olfactier, it might be drawn to the unique qualities of that fear, like how a sculptor sees potential in a block of marble.
Wow. That is seriously disturbing. It's like it's creating something, but what does it all mean?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, that's the beauty of Jeepers Creepers. It doesn't give you all the answers. You got to come up with your own interpretation.
And it's that open-endedness that keeps people talking about this movie years later.
Oh, absolutely. And there are so many directions you could go with it. The source material you gave me even brought up some interesting fan theories, like some people think the creeper is demonic, and then there are others who think it's like extraterrestrial. What do you think about those?
I can see both sides. I mean, on the one hand, you've got those almost biblical elements, right? Like that 23-year cycle, that whole gruesome way it feeds. It's like some kind of twisted, monstrous communion.
Right. Exactly.
And then on the other hand, you've got the creepers. Like bizarre physicality. I mean, this thing can fly, and it's got this almost supernatural awareness. It definitely makes you wonder if it's something otherworldly.
It does.
So it's like a choose your own adventure when it comes
Mhm.
to what kind of horror speaks to you the most.
Exactly. And I think that ambiguity is part of what makes it so effective. It lets the horror kind of take root in different ways for different people.
You know, it's like the film knows that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones we can't fully wrap our heads around,
Yeah.
you know? Like that uncertainty is way more unsettling than any answer could ever be.
100%. And that's probably why Jeepers Creepers, even though it didn't have a huge budget or anything, it still spawned sequels and even a reboot. It obviously really struck a nerve with people.
For sure. But why do you think that is? What is it about this monster, about this film, that still resonates, even as the horror genre is constantly changing?
I think it's that perfect storm of elements we keep coming back to.
Yeah.
How genuinely creepy the monster is, the way the director uses tension and atmosphere, the performances, and of course that ending. Haunting. It just gets under your skin.
Oh, and don't forget that soundtrack. That haunting version of Jeepers Creepers is enough to give anyone chills. I swear, even just hearing it on the radio can trigger it.
It's true. It's one of those iconic horror movie themes that just immediately takes you back to that creepy atmosphere.
This deep dive has definitely given me a whole new appreciation for Jeepers Creepers. It's so much more than just a monster movie. It's like a masterclass in fear and suspense. No wonder it's considered a classic.
I agree. It's one of those films that you get more out of each time you watch it. You know, you pick up on new details, new nuances.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, for our listeners, we've covered a lot of ground here, from those early scenes that introduce us to the creeper all the way to the film's lasting impact on the horror genre.
And speaking of impact, the source material you gave me mentioned this really interesting interpretation of the film. Looking at it through the lens of trauma, what do you think about that reading?
You know, that's really fascinating. I can definitely see how that perspective adds another layer to the whole thing.
Yeah.
When you think about those feelings of helplessness, the sense of being hunted, the struggle to make sense of this chaotic and terrifying situation, it really does resonate with the experiences of trauma survivors.
Yeah, and that ending, as unsettling as it is, becomes even more powerful when you view it through that lens.
For sure. Even though they escape in the end, there's that feeling that they're forever changed by the experience. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. It's like this reminder that trauma doesn't just disappear. The scars stick around even after the wounds have healed.
It adds a whole other level of tragedy to the story, that's for sure. And it also speaks to the power of horror as a genre, right?
Yeah.
Like, it allows us to confront difficult emotions in a way that feels safe.
I totally agree. It can be cathartic to work through darkness in a way that feels controlled, even if it's just within the world of a film, right?
Exactly.
Well,
So, for everyone listening, for anyone who's been with us on this journey through Jeepers Creepers, what's the one thing you want them to take away from our deep dive?
that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones that jump out at you. They're the ones that get in your head, the ones that prey on your deepest fears and remind you that even in broad daylight, there's always a shadow lurking somewhere.
Ooh, chills. And that is a wrap on our Jeepers Creepers deep dive. If this conversation has piqued your curiosity, listener, we highly recommend giving the film another watch if you dare. We have a feeling you'll be looking at those old trucks a little differently on your next road trip.